Hello folks, I hope that you are having just the best day in your life today. Today we're going to be taking another look at J.r.r. Tolkien. We're going to be looking at my Tolkien Reader, which I'll link to you in the comments below. I think there's a more recent version than my 1966 copy. So I'll link you to, I think there's one published in the 80s. I did a little research on it. So we're going to be looking at Leaf by Niggle, which in my novel-sized collection is only 28 pages long. I read it last night for just the second time. So I wanted to go ahead and review it for you today and take a look at it. It was published in 1945. It was written in 3738. And it's published as part of a two-part collection called Tree and Leaf. The idea is that there is an essay called On Fairy Stories by J.r.r. Tolkien, where he goes over his view of the fairy story. And one of his basic views of the fairy story is that this idea of subcreation, that the creator created things perfectly. And then we have basically two ways that we can create. One that's good and one that's evil. If we create that mocks God, that's evil. And if we create in a way that echoes what God did, then that's good and just, and things that we should be aiming to do. And then he submitted, after that essay, it's about 7 pages long, with footnotes. And then after that, he has Leaf by Niggle, where the idea of subcreation is something that you saw. Now, this is also something that J.r.r. Tolkien did in his Middle-earth. For example, in the creation story that's told in the Silmarillion, one of the things that happens in that story is that the head god, Eru, who's the main creator, creates, and the god analogy creates the world, and creates existence, and creates elves. And one of the gods creates dwarves as an echo of that divinity. And those people are accepted. They are good. And then another one of the big bads, it makes Valar makes a mockery of elves called orcs, and the orcs are not accepted. They're not good. Orcs, evil, dwarves, good. See how that works? You can see this idea of subcreation in things, and this idea of subcreation is the key point that Tolkien is making on Fairy Tales, and which Leaf by Niggle, as published in the same book, Tree and Leaf, therefore helps to show. And we're going to be helping you to show it because Leaf by Niggle is a story about a writer who is writing. And so one of the things that's going to be happening in this short story is that we're going to open up and we're going to find out a lot about Niggle, who is an artist. And he does some other things. So he's an artist with his passion, but it's not his day job, if you will. He has an estate, he has a farm, he seems to be independently wealthy, and he just really enjoys art. And he really enjoys making leaves, and he really spends time with each leaf, making them independent, individual, beautiful, and he really just loves spending and investing a lot of his time with leaves. And then recently he's become obsessed with a painting that he is doing, and he knows that he has to pack for a journey that will be happening soon. He knows he needs to spend time with other people. He knows he needs to be spending time on his garden, but he just can't bring himself to do it as much or as happily because he's just so obsessed with this painting, and this painting that's becoming more and more of an obsession to him. And it's longer than a year. And he's going to be, there's this tree, he takes his other paintings, or stops them, or takes them, makes them apart. He'll actually attach them to the big canvas to make ever increasingly larger canvases with mountains, and with a tree, and with water, and with trees, and leaves, and branches, in this nature scene, this pastoral nature scene, if you will, in the wilderness, is something that is just overtaking him as a person, and you're going to see him becoming more and more obsessed, letting the rest of the world pass by. And then he becomes more annoyed with the world as he passes by. And so that's kind of the key point of Niggle. he is an artist by passion, but not by trait. And one of the things that I thought of when I was reading this story actually reminds me of a novel that I've already reread for you called What Dreams May Be, and this reminds me a lot of that. I was also reminded of some things that were happening at the time in Tolkien's life. This seems like it might be an allegory for Tolkien himself. His obsession with Middle-earth, with doing things perfectly, whether it's his prose, whether it's his writing, whether it's his coming up with a language like creating an actual language for his world, creating maps, creating background information for his world, fleshing it out. These sorts of things show, I think, the introvert in Tolkien. He is somebody who cares a lot about this project. He's very, very passionate about, just like Niggle is passionate about his art. Tolkien is also passionate about his art, just not painting, but writing and creating worlds. And you can definitely see it in what Tolkien is doing. And so I think there might be an allegorical way to see it. But Tolkien himself was never a big fan of allegory. And so he probably would not be okay with my interpretation of Leaf by Niggle as autobiographical in nature. It does have a religious allegory. It feels like it has some possible afterlife and religious allegories, and limbo, and those sorts of things are things that you can kind of see in there and read in there. So it definitely has that, and he was a practicing Catholic, so you can certainly read this as a religious or spiritual work. And in fact, it was actually published in 1945 in the first thing in a Dublin journal. It was published out of London, but it's called the Dublin Review, and it is a Catholic journal, is where Leaf by Niggle was first published in 1945. So you can definitely see that as an allegory, and Catholics obviously believe, in limbo and a place to go and work, and so you can definitely see that, if you will, as a one interpretation of that. I also think that there's a value. I was also kind of reminded of what would life have been like for Niggle if he lived in a world that valued art. If he lived in a world where AI has taken over and you're able just to do the things that you want to do, right? And he just loves art. He doesn't have to worry about, he doesn't have to work for food. He doesn't have to work for money. He doesn't have to work for things. He just has his leisure time and he can just be a painter, which he loves. And he was, and nothing's annoying him, nothing's interrupting him, right? And what would Niggle be like in our modern world, or in 15, 20, 30 years after AI takes over and is doing a lot more work? I think that would be that to me is an interesting question that I was asking while I was rereading Leaf by Niggle by Tolkien. So I'm going to be giving this an 8 out of 10. Tolkien's a great writer, and obviously he's a well-known guy. I read this when I was a kid, and I haven't read it as an adult. So this is the first time I've gone back and read Leaf by Niggle, going back to it as an adult. And I really enjoyed it. I read it as a kid when I read the Tolkien Reader, but I didn't read where I read all the prose stuff. I read on fairy tales, Leaf by Niggle, and Farmer Charles of Ham, but I did not read the Homecoming, which is a play, nor did I read The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, which are poems. But my hope is that I'll knock out at least one of those two, if not another one, for the first time here coming soon. But this doesn't feel like fantasy. It feels more like speculative fiction. Leaf isn't painting, Niggle isn't painting in the Middle Ages in a fantasy world with dragons and zombies or orcs, right? He's not painting in that world, right? It definitely feels like a modern world, but it definitely feels more like speculative fiction, if you will, than fantasy. But, you know, like Farmer Charles of Ham, which I reviewed for you last week, it's an absolute fantasy. But this one, even though it's in the story, in the publication Tree and Leaf on fairy stories, does not feel like a fairy story. It feels more like a light science fiction, a light speculative fiction, if you will. But anyway, there you are. That's Leaf by Niggle by Tolkien. So have you read it? What did you think about it? Did you agree or disagree with my take? Would you like to talk about the ending? Would you like to talk about spoilers in the comments below? I would be more than happy to engage you with them further in the comments. If you like this video, well, why not hit that subscribe button, because there's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And then finally, hey, I just want to thank you for taking some time out of your day and investing it and watching my video. We all have so many things happening in our lives, right? And we're being pulled in so many different directions. So I appreciate that you spent time and invested in watching my video. Thanks again, and have a great day.